you guys prefer to have these recordings, and that's what we're going to do. I'm going to mention this later on, but maybe it's a good idea now, speaking about recording, to tell you, to show you where you can find them. So if you go to our official website, atlantabi.past.org, I put it conveniently right here on the homepage. So there is a link. Go there, click the link, and that's going to bring you to YouTube. Hopefully, for some reason, it's not navigating. Okay, my browser officially hang. My first presentation for today did not work. My first demo. So I'm going to try again. Yeah, final. Okay. Click on that link. That's going to go. So far, we have 2 meetings that we recorded virtual, and this is going to be obviously the 3rd one. So that's how you get them.
Cool.
Nice, right?
Pretty good.
Cool. So, all right, let's go and officially kick this off. Again, thank you so much, guys, for joining, being part of the community, attending our meetings. This is our August 3rd digital event meeting for Atlanta BI. My name is Theo Lachiev, your fearless leader for how many? 10 years. So today, this month, actually, it's a special occasion for our group.
Yeah, happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary, yep, because we've got 10 years, believe it or not.
And this week is the 5th anniversary of Power BI too. So
yeah, I have something to say about this later on, but thanks so much for reminding me. So I want to take here the opportunity to thank all, well, maybe not all, but I guess our venue sponsors, our individuals. As they say, it takes a village to raise a child, and it takes a village actually to run a group. So now is the time actually to thank our volunteers. As you probably know, we started 2010. Those of you who actually were our early attendees, you remember we started at the Perimeter Center at the Matrix Resources office. Initially, Matrix Resources was our first sponsor. We were looking for a room, and I was going around Atlanta, going to things like UMCA, churches, and things like this. And Matrix actually were the kind of extended sponsorship. Initially, just one room. They had like a training room in the Perimeter Center. This way we started. I think our first meeting we had like 12, 13 people. And then
I remember that.
What did you say, Tom?
I remember that meeting. Yes.
Remember that meeting? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Matrix, once we started, we actually kept on growing. We kind of outgrew the capacity of that room. So they switched us to the auditory room actually on the first floor. That those of you who actually were following for a while will remember kind of the theatrical setting that were capable of accommodating like 100 people, and sometimes we actually filled in that room. We had like 80, 90 people or something like that. Then Matrix moved out of the Perimeter Center, and then we had another sponsor, Agile Tech, who they actually don't exist anymore. They merged with another company. And then TRC Professional Solutions were our last sponsor down there at the Perimeter Center. And then a couple of years ago, we moved to the Microsoft office, as you guys know. So that was our sponsors, the venue sponsors. We're entirely self-reliant group. We don't get any sponsorship for anybody as far as money or anything like this. And I also want to thank the individuals. Damu Venkatasan, as you know, has been very involved in the community. You know, he was one of the first, you know, helpers with this group. At Watson, actually, he's responsible for updating the dynamic communities website. So we have 3 websites: Atlanta BI, at pass.org, the meetup group, and then we have Dynamics community, which is actually co-sponsored with Microsoft and another organization. So it is helping with that. Eric Flam also was helping. You know, you continue to actually help with certain organizational aspects. John, very involved at the very beginning. Actually, I'm not sure where. John, when did you join us?
I think it was 1 or 2 meetings in, because actually I was going for my certification, my MCITP certification, and somebody said that there's a meetup group that just started, and I think I missed the first, maybe second meeting, and then I joined there, and it's been there ever since.
That's right. And then you went to kind of relocate it, and then you come back and continue helping us. So John helps quite a bit with when we meet on person, organize the food, the drinks, and all that. Mark T. Tabladillo, he actually was with our group since the very beginning. In fact, he you know, was very involved in the very beginning with different aspects. Now he moved to Microsoft and is not that much involved anymore. Michael Clifford was actually one of the first organizers together with me when we started all the way back. He's not attending anymore. He's not coming to our meetings. He retired happily. Neil Water Street also helped for many, many years with food organizations and all of that. Paco Gonzalez, he helps with sponsors, speakers, and pretty much everything else that we throw to him. And then Samara is our blue ribbon at Microsoft. She's actually, when we meet at the Microsoft office, she's staying with us to make sure that the venue is, everything is okay there. And finally, I want to thank you guys for keep on attending these meetings. Hopefully it's going to be another 10 years or even more. So keep on coming. I appreciate all the support. Anybody has anything to say from the organizers? I'm not sure who is attending except John and Damu. If you guys think of anything else to mention on this special occasion, unfortunately, we cannot give you ice cream or anything like this. So welcome to the virtual world.
We'll do it next time when we meet in person.
Next time we'll give you 2.
Yeah.
2 cones. I'm curious, how many of you actually, I know that with this virtualization thing, one of the good aspects of it is that people not only in Atlanta can join us. So actually there's another job posting here. You guys may be following the chat window. There's another job posting I want to find interesting, but how many of you actually new to the group? Okay, if you can just put like a message in the chat window, that would be awesome. Just let us know if this is the first time you're attending. First meeting, okay, we got 1 person. How many, is there anybody who is not, okay, second meeting, third meeting, first time here? Okay, we got some first timers, thank you so much. Is there anyone who is not from the Atlanta, from the Atlanta region, from the Atlanta metro? And Danny, I know you're not from there, and I know Chris is not from here. Anybody else who's actually joining from other countries? I guess not today. Sometimes we get people all over the place in this virtual meeting. So we have a few new people. I just want to go real quick through the same thing that we're going every time, but it makes sense, you know, practice makes it perfect to kind of repeat those things. If you haven't, so we have 3 virtual, 3 venues, as I mentioned, 3 sites, Meetup, where a lot of you hear about us, dynamic communities, but our official one is this one, atlantabi.pass.org. So it will be great if you can associate. If you have a PASS, we're kind of affiliated with an organization called PASS that actually sponsored the PASS Summit. We've been affiliated with them since the very beginning. If you have a login, you can associate yourself with our group so you can get notifications. So while you're on the homepage, take a look at the information here. Those of you who join us later, I already mentioned that this is a link to the recordings. We started putting like a kind of record our virtual meetings, and this is where we can find them. Before every meeting, I'll appreciate if you can confirm your attendance, just to know how many people are going to be coming. And then if the speaker give us the slides, the slide deck, you can find this in the resources section. Resources section on the website. There we go. I think that's it as far as the website. Before each meeting, RSVP, spread the word. Spread the word if you like the value, if you get value from these meetings, get involved. We always, well, right now the sponsorship kind of took care of itself, but we're always looking for speakers. So if you have the urge to share a message and to present either a full presentation, which is like an hour or so, or kind of give us tips or tricks, something you learn, please let me know. We also take donations, so when we start again, if we run out of sponsors, we're going to use the donations to buy food and drinks. I already asked for job offerings. Those of you who join us late, please take a look at the chat window. There is a couple of job openings if you're looking for an opportunity in the BI space. If somebody have additional job openings, want to advertise them either on the microphone or in the chat window, please feel free to do so. Does anybody have any announcements, job related?
Hey Teo, this is Madhav here. I actually just posted that above because I thought I missed out, but I'd love to talk about it for a few minutes if you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Teo. So Teo, actually, I joined these actual meetings a few years ago when I was in Atlanta, and I moved to Austin. So since then, I've been in Austin, but it's cool to be back here. So just wanted to say, good to be back.
Welcome back.
Thank you. So my name is Madhav Srinath. I am a managing director at Nexus Leap. It's a company I started a few months ago, focusing on artificial intelligence and analytics. I've done consulting companies before. I've also done venture-funded companies before, and I'm looking to hire my first full-time hire. It's analytics manager is the official role title. It is a remote position, so if you're anywhere in the U.S., completely okay. I am in Austin, so we'll be kind of working together that way. Power BI expertise preferred, and some cloud experience also preferred. I would hate to say the word AWS here, but that's a requirement for this specific one. Azure is also completely okay.
Great.
Thank you, Teo.
That's no problem at all. Thanks for advertising this. So that was a manager level position with some Power BI experience preferred, kind of a virtual environment. Anybody else? Guess not. Events. Couple of events coming up. Microsoft Ignite, September 2020. It's going to be a digital event, which means complimentary. You can go ahead and register. This is actually the biggest Microsoft conference, not just BI, but everything else, everything Microsoft related. And then, of course, the PASS Summit coming in November 10-13. Also, it's going to be a virtual event, but this one actually it's paid. And if you use this code, you're going to get $50 off the registration price. This code is specific for our group. So it's a little bit of discount there. I think I sent you an email. We sent an email to everyone So everyone registered on our website. So you should have received that email as well, but this is the code. Great. The next thing, a little bit about what kind of some of the things that caught my attention since our last meeting in early July. By the way, those of you who are new to the group, we meet typically on the first Monday of the month, whatever that falls in. Since our last meeting, those are the most important thing that I noticed. So Power BI celebrates 5-year anniversary, July 16, believe it or not. It's a mature technology by now. Then I'm going to show you a little bit of the Azure map, but we have actually another map visualization that came in Power BI Desktop. This came from Azure Map, which is an open source, as far as I know, platform for geospatial analytics. So actually, I'm really excited about this visual. We don't have a lot of features right now in Power BI Desktop since it's still in preview, but what I saw, it's pretty nice, really. Then we added like 49 functions to the DAX from Excel. So in Excel, we have a lot of financial functions, such as things that calculate yield, and other financial stuff. So now we have them in DAX, borrowed from Excel. And the other thing is that in Power BI Desktop now we have the ability to launch external tools. So let's go and jump to a little demo to show you a little bit of that. And the first thing is the Azure map visual. So if you get the latest Power BI Desktop, on the visualization pane, you're going to see this. I think actually you have to enable it. Those of you who actually follow Power BI for a while know that preview features, they need to be specifically enabled. So you got to go to File Options, and then in the preview features, make sure that you check the Azure Map Visual because it's currently under testing. So once you enable this and restart, you're going to have it in the visualization pane. So here what I did, very simple demo. I have a list of cities in the world with their population. So I can slice up and down and I can see how the Azure maps behave. So what do I like about this visual? By default, we've got bubbles, just like the original map visuals in Power BI. But we have different options here that we can use to configure the map. And by the way, you don't need special license. All of this is just like the other maps. They are included in Power BI Desktop. Therefore, you don't need to purchase licensing or anything like this. So let's see. I'm gonna mute you guys if you don't mind, since we have some background noise. Please feel free to unmute yourself if you got a question, and then remember to go back mute for the sake of all the other attendees. So here we have, we actually configure the map. We specify latitude and longitude. It looks like that's the only thing that we take now. So you gotta have the coordinates. This is not that interesting. What's becoming more interesting is that, oh, by the way, the map itself has a little flyout here, as you can see. So for instance, you can change from this type of map, you can change to a nightly map, you can change to a satellite map. So there is a lot of different styles here that you can choose from. Depends on the color theme that you use on your report, I guess. Then in the map settings, we have also buttons here to zoom in and out, to also change the perspective. So for example, if I want to do a little bit like a 3D, which comes handy if you're displaying bars instead of bubbles, you can do that. You can zoom in and out. So by default, as I said, data is plotted as bubbles, but you can turn this off and you can turn on bar chart. So bar chart is another visualization that we have. So this is where actually this 3D effect might be useful. And then another good thing that is coming up that actually we have is a reference layer. So you can create your own reference layer. So for example, what I did here, let's say I want to actually have counties in the United States. So if I prepare a special JSON file, which, so let's take a moment and actually open this in Notepad first. So here I have a JSON file that actually tells me has a list of counties and the polygon of the county, the geographical polygon. So you got to have a file like this, but if you do it, if you have it, then you can just open it, and that actually becomes a reference layer in the map. So if I now go to United States, because this is list of counties only in the United States, and if I start zooming in, you actually see where these counties are, right? So you can plug in your own reference layers. There are some layers I think predefined by Microsoft, like population and stuff like that, that you can also plug in. And also there is a traffic layer. So if you want to get real-time traffic, you can actually turn this on. I think that's pretty much all that we have for now as far as features, but more features probably going to come in. So looking for another layer besides the 4 or 5 maps that we have already. If you're looking for another one, take a look at the Azure maps. The next thing that I want to show is that now we have a new ribbon in the Power BI desktop called External Tools. So the idea here is that, you can launch some of your favorite community tools from within Power BI desktop. So how is that useful besides just putting shortcuts? Well, what happens is that, let's say if I launch DAX Studio, not only it launches the tool, but it connects it directly to the model that I have open in the desktop. So you don't have to go and figure out the port of the analysis services instance or anything else. It just automatically connects it. And there we go. I can actually start creating my queries. And the same thing happens with the other two tools. So by default, you're not going to get these external tools. The way I got it is that you have to run the latest installers for this community tool. By the way, if you're not familiar what they do, these three community tools, ALM Toolkit is something that I haven't personally used, but it allows you to compare the metadata of two models, tabular models or Power BI desktop models, to see what actually has changed. DAX Studio, it's a tool for creating DAX queries. Tabular Editor is my favorite tool for actually working with analysis services tabular models. So no matter which tool you click, it's going to connect to the model, and that's it. But to get it, go and download the latest installers for these tools, run them. They're going to actually register. They create a file that has to go to a specific folder, specific JSON file. So actually Power BI desktop can recognize these tools. And you can create your own files. If you have additional tools that you use, Microsoft, their documentation actually tell you exactly what you need to put in that file, and then you can add your own tools. So I'm really excited about this. This is only the beginning. What I would probably, I would expect to happen in future is kind of a more robust extensibility like what we have in Excel, ability to have these tools actually to do things with the Power BI desktop, like maybe do source control and stuff like that. So, but this is just I guess the beginning, the first thing about the community integration and extensibility of Power BI Desktop. Any questions about what I showed you? See if we've got anything in the chat window. Is it free? Okay, that was I already addressed that question. I knew that will be on the top of the everybody's mind. Yes, so Azure Map is free, just like Power BI Desktop. All these tools are free so far. That's nice. I know, but I had to ask. ALM have less usage, but DAX Studio and Tabular are pretty robust. Yes, these two tools, I also use them a lot. DAX Studio, everybody who actually kind of reaches a certain level of DAX knows about DAX Studio. You know, creating these visualizations, these measures, and testing them in Power BI Desktop, you know, get you to a certain point, but then it becomes kind of cumbersome, right? You gotta use that rudimentary editor in Power BI Desktop. You gotta commit, you gotta wait, then you have to go and test it. DAX Studio makes this much, much faster. Tabular editor, if you're disappointed with SQL Server data tools, I will highly recommend it. You know, it's more advanced. Actually, what I do, I use both. I use SSDT for diagramming support, since Tabular Editor doesn't have it, and maybe to do kind of importing tables and stuff like that. But from that point on, I actually use Tabular Editor because it's much faster and it has features that SSDT doesn't have, like mass rename of measures or changing the formulas as by creating a script. So it has a scripting environment. So it's really nice. What is the diagramming support? Diagramming support is this diagram here. So in Power BI Desktop and SSDT, we have the ability to put tables and see their relationships. So if you're creating tabular analysis services, tabular models, you know that SSDT also has a diagramming feature. You can actually see the diagram, but Tabular Editor doesn't have it. Since both of them, however, write to the same file, a BIM file, you know, you can actually use each one of those. It doesn't really matter. You can start with SSDT, can switch to Tabular Editor, then you can go back to SSDT to use some features. It works really nice. Great. Well, it looks like we kind of exhausted the question. Okay, there's another one. Which one, Shabnan is asking, which one do you use if you need to work with partitions? So she's asking, partitions are analysis services concept, analysis services tabular and multi-dimensional concept. If I want to use partitions, so it really depends. If I want to clone partitions, because, you know, SSDT has some, you know, ability to help you with the first partition, specify the query, maybe you can start there. But if I really want to just clone the partitions, then both tools will do it. SSDT also has a feature for cloning partitions very fast. The good thing about Tabular Editor, since there is a little bit of interest, I'm sorry, I'm kind of digressing a little bit about it, is that it's very fast, you know? So SSDT and Power BI Desktop, you guys know that behind the scenes, they use analysis services. They spin a separate instance of analysis services. So every time you make a change, like renaming column, adding a new column, every single change you make, there is a commit going on to this analysis services database. And that, for me, it's really, really frustrating, especially if you have to deal with a lot of tables. So Tabular Editor, on the other hand, doesn't require workspace database or anything like this. So you just go to the tables, like your measure, make the change here, click Save. Once you're done, you can go ahead and deploy. So it's all metadata driven. There is no data view, which is obviously good if you are after performance, but also it's not so good if you're a novice user. You want to see every time you do a change what happened with the data. So you have to pick kind of what do you want. For me, I prefer speed. When I work on my projects, I want to actually do all these changes to do them as soon as possible, go ahead and commute them, and then I actually test them. So partitions, you can go either way. You can actually do partitions here, Partition is not a big thing. The big thing for me is just these changes and the long time it takes to commit them. And then, as I mentioned, there is also a patch environment, advanced scripting options, where actually you can do mass changes. All right, why are we waiting for you? LOL. Okay, very nice. Any other questions before I disappear? All right, Theo is gonna exit the presentation. Now I'm gonna invite our main presenter to do the main presentation, Chris Hamill. So I met Chris when we had a project recently for a very large company, when we worked on the kind of a highly visible project. It was executive dashboard, and there was a lot of attention behind this. So this particular company just hired a new CEO, and they were in rush to do a dashboard and all of this to become data driven, actually, to make data driven decisions at the high level. So the interesting story was that obviously there were a lot of people involved. There were people from all teams in the company involved in this dashboard, and somebody did the design of the dashboard, the original, the mock-up of the dashboard. And of course, when the designer does a mock-up, they don't care about naturally, they don't care about the tool capability, in this case, Power BI. They care about what that dashboard will show. So the implementation team actually has took this design to the heart, and they did it exactly. They follow it to the letter. But the only caveat is that when they were done, it took actually it will take a while for the dashboard to load for the first page, which was the most important, the summary page. So performance wasn't there. It was taking like 20 seconds to load, although they didn't have a lot of data. All they had was summary data, so the DAX queries were very, very fast. So we were wondering where actually this delay comes from, and it turns out that they use a lot of visualizations, because for every single visual, and Chris probably is going to tell you about this, they use separate visualization, so it looks exactly like the design. So we didn't know what to do. They tried to minimize the number of visualizations. They couldn't do it, and then Chris came in, and he showed them interesting techniques to combine like 4 or 6 visuals into one by using the standard visualization in Power BI like matrix. So they did this, they followed his advice, and from like 100 and something visualization on that page, they went to like 40 or something like that. And of course, the load time significantly improved, right? So I thought you may find some of these techniques very, very useful. And I invited Chris, who actually, it's a very busy guy. He's on the Power BI CAT team, to come and share some of these techniques. Chris, thank you so much for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Absolutely. So, and for more detail, it was 166 visuals, and I think we got down to 44 or so.
Right.
So I'm going to share my screen, and I'll just very quickly, I'm going to walk through a couple of things just to set the context, and then I'll get into a demo that'll show you kind of how to kind of manage the features to do what we did for that particular example. But I'm going to start off with an introduction. Some of you might know me, but you're probably more familiar with the other folks on the team. So I'm on the same team as Guy in a Cube. So Patrick and Adam are both on my team. And essentially our jobs, while we're on the same team, are very different. So they do more broad scope Power BI. So they touch everything end to end. But my main focus is on the front end. So if you have a complex DAX question, I'm not the guy for that. Phil Seamark's the guy for that one. Or if you have a complex query question, definitely not me. But if you have front end design that you need help with, that's where I do my work. So I wanted to start with a couple things. So I want to first talk very quickly about where I came from, the career path to getting to the Power BI team, because it's a little interesting and different than you'd probably expect. Very briefly touch on like high level effective design elements, And then we'll dive into this piece, which is designing for performance. And if time allows, there's a report redesign piece that I think you guys would find interesting. I also want to leave it open for questions as we go through. And Theo, if questions come up in the chat while I'm in the presentation, feel free to stop me and we can make it conversational as well. Okay, so career path. It's a weird one. I started off in accounting. So I'm from Iowa. From Des Moines, Iowa, and I went to school to be an accountant. And it was 2009 is when I graduated, and the idea was I just need a job I just need a career or a degree that's going to get me a job. So I picked accounting, didn't really care about accounting, but landed my first job in payroll accounting at a school district, and it was miserable, like just absolutely miserable. I was doing the payroll for the hourly side, because in school districts, like I think there's somebody from school district on the call, you have two pieces. You have the teachers and the administrative staff that are all salaried, and then you have the associates and the custodians and bus drivers that all are hourly and work very varying schedules. So I'd end up like they wouldn't submit a time card and they'd call you yelling that they didn't get paid correctly and essentially accuse you of taking their money and things like that. So it wasn't very good. It wasn't very fun. And like really the most advanced reporting I did was Excel based. I think a pivot table wasn't even a thing that I was using at that stage in my career. But anyways, that job was bad enough that I quit without a job and moved out to Seattle. And then landed very quickly. I went to a temp agency. I was like, I got to find something. And I started doing a construction management support job for Grubb & Ellis. And they were, at the time, they managed all of Microsoft's construction projects. So I was on Microsoft campus, but working for that company. And then they mismanaged a little bit and went bankrupt. So I transitioned over to CBRE because they took over that function. And I got back into more strictly accounting type work, doing accounting for facilities management for Microsoft facilities. So HVAC, beverage management, custodial, that kind of stuff. But eventually, being out here in Seattle, one of the big companies that people would want to work for other than Microsoft is Starbucks. And I happened to meet a guy through golf, which is kind of funny, who was a VP of store development at Starbucks. So one day I reached out to him to see if he had anything available. And just like a month later, I was done with CBRE and on to Starbucks. But I already lived in Redmond, which is important because Starbucks is in South downtown Seattle. And it was probably a 45-minute drive on a good day and a 2-hour drive on a bad day. So when Microsoft reached back out, I was like, oh, I got to do that. So this would have been February of 2015. So I've been at Microsoft, I guess 2016. I've been over 4.5 years now. But I was hired to do headcount planning for marketing at Microsoft. And it's a finance function. So you'd plan like G&A cost, like the ramp for headcount, like hires and attrition, that kind of thing. And when I was at Starbucks, I picked up Tableau. That was the first real reporting that I had done that was more like legit rather than my own analysis. So when I came over to Microsoft and I picked up Power BI, I was actually very disappointed. So this would have been 4.5 years ago. And if you remember Power BI 4.5 years ago, it was not very good. So I tried it and I hated it and I put it back down. So I'm here for a reason, and it's because I decided to pick it back up. So 6 months later, which was actually a big 6 months when it comes to development, they did a lot of work. Between when I first started and that 6 months later, I had this very niche problem and I didn't quite know how to solve it, but I knew if I used Excel, it was going to be a repetitive nightmare that I'd have to just keep going back every day and running these reports. So I built a SharePoint list to manage it. And I figured out, I picked up Power BI again. I figured out I could point to the SharePoint list, pull the query, and then it was like a debit credit type entry thing. And I didn't want my end users to go enter two forms to be able to do this thing. So I figured you could pull it once, cut it to the debit side, pull it the second time, cut it to the credit side, and pin the two. And then we have like automated the entry process, so they only have to do one form, and automated the reporting, so I didn't have to do any manual pieces to it. So I did that. My boss was like, this is great, go do more Power BI, because internally at Microsoft, they're always pushing you to use the latest technology that we have. And I think they honestly pushed a little bit too quickly with Power BI, and a lot of finance people internally at that time were not willing to go spend time learning it, because they had tried it really early on and then just didn't like it very much and put it back down. But luckily, I picked it back up, and everything the boss threw at me, I took and ran away with. And it got to the point where instead of doing headcount planning, I moved to just do reporting in Power BI. So no more ROB or any of that stuff. It was all about working with data and building reports off of that data to make our controllers' jobs easier in the finance group. So eventually, I did a lot of that. I guess it's not too long. It was only about a year where it was purely Power BI, because I kept getting dragged back into headcount. But eventually, through contacts that I had made, I moved over to Power BI customer advisory team about a year ago. And there was a really big, if I have time at the end, I'll show it a little bit. But there was a big side project I did that helped get a lot of attention from them. It was for the 2018 Ryder Cup, to help Jim Furyk pick his team for the event. And it was a brand partnership Microsoft had, and I volunteered for that. But at the end of the day, we had a really refined and nice report that I was able to kind of go open doors at the Power BI team, because when I showed it to them, they were like, "I'm like, how did you do this?" I was like, "I used your tool," so it worked out pretty well. But yeah, I've been on the Power BI cat team for a little over a year. Primary focus is on the front end, like I mentioned earlier. And yeah, I love the job, love the team, and love Power BI. It's an unhealthy obsession at this point. Any questions so far? Just pause for a second.
No, Chris, we don't have questions, so
Cool.
everybody's waiting to get to the cool stuff, I guess.
So I'm gonna go through this really quickly, and then I'll go into the example. But these are some high-level tips, just as a report author who gets to focus primarily on that front piece. Just things that I try to keep in mind every time. So number one is knowing your audience. If you don't know your audience, you can't really build a report to suit that audience. Knowing what platforms you're going to be working with. So with Power BI being such an expansive thing, there's mobile, there's embed, there's through the service consumption. Knowing where you're going to serve up information is very important when it comes to design, because each one has its own nuances. Testing your assumptions, so getting users to try things out. A lot of times you might think you know exactly what the design should be about, but at the end of the day, the users have to be happy, and if they want that goofy pie chart, then you have to give them that goofy pie chart sometimes. Failing fast, so it's cool to try new things, but if it's not working out, it's good to recognize it and get out of there pretty quickly. And then iterating often, so getting feedback, taking it back, adjusting, and going back and forth with your end users is incredibly powerful. And lastly, and very important to me, is avoiding overwhelming your end users. A lot of times we see where people, like this example that Theo mentioned a bit ago, they put so much stuff on the page that not only does it perform really poorly, but it's actually really overwhelming for the end users to try to navigate. And then I'm going to skip through this one and get to the goodies, but these are some design elements that are very important when it comes down to delivering a good message. But most importantly in this case is going to be performance. And I'm going to hop over to the Power BI desktop and show you what I'm talking about. So I mocked up an example to kind of demonstrate. It's not as extreme as the real use case, which is kind of funny, but to demonstrate how having a bunch of elements on your page can cost you performance, and how some simple changes can actually make your performance a lot better. So I'm in desktop. I have this report page, and while this is very different looking than what we had seen with the customer, it has a lot of the same elements. So individual cards, text boxes, shapes that give you design elements. So down here, another text box. To get the formatting in this particular way, it's more text boxes. So there's a lot going on here, and more cards as well. And then again, more shapes. And if we come over and look at this, so this is our before page here, but if I come over to this after page, you'll see it looks pretty much the same. But if we look at the performance analyzer, so I'm back on the before now, I'm going to go performance analyzer, start recording, and refresh. You'll see how many elements we have. And you also see that we have some elements that have over a second render time, which isn't bad when it comes down to it. But in this case, we have maybe 30 objects. In the real case, we had 166. And if you expand on the performance analyzer, you'll notice there's a few buckets here. So DAX query, which is pretty self-explanatory, visual display, and then other. And you'll notice the more stuff we have on the page, the bigger that other bucket grows. And I'm not a web person. I don't know too much on the technical side, but my understanding in this case is when Power BI renders using JavaScript, and JavaScript is single-threaded, so the performance is very dependent on your browser and your PC. So if you have a lot of RAM, then it's going to run a little quicker. If you're in a current browser, so Chrome or the new Edge, that I should probably say is better than Chrome at this point, it's going to render a lot quicker. But it is limited. So you can really only render so many visuals at a time. And then the more visuals you have on the page, the bigger that other bucket will grow, because that's wait time before those other objects can render. So now if I come over to my after page and just get a mental picture of what this looks like now, I come over to the after page, which looks identical or very close to identical, maybe a little bit different. And I refresh these visuals. You'll notice the fastest time is 301, and the other time on that was only 117 compared to the other page, which had one that was about 800. But essentially, what we do here, and I'll go through the nitty-gritty formatting steps, but what we're trying to do is take as many elements to the background as we can. I'm a very big proponent of backgrounds. A good background can really set the tone for a report design and improve performance by only rendering one object instead of many. So in this case, background-wise, we had this text box we were able to take to the background, this shape, and these are all realistic. I've seen people do this. I've actually done some of the shape stuff myself in the past too. The image is a piece of that we could bring to the background, some more shapes down here. And then all of these text boxes and cards we actually convert into a really well-formatted matrix. So I'll show you how that works as well. But if we go from before to after, you'll see one right here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. We're able to actually make that one object here. So before I move on to the actual nitty-gritty formatting, any questions? I can actually pull up Teams now that I'm not in presentation mode.
Yes, Chris. So we have, I guess, one question. Have you used Power BI in R or Power BI in Python? And I'm curious what development challenges you have faced as Power BI has developed. And I guess the focus here is on performance, like R and Python calculations, because they have performance issues too. Have you done anything around?
I actually haven't used R or Python at all, and I think it actually lends to my history as a finance person. I'm not that technical, and I usually am able to get anything done that I need to get done to produce a high-quality result just with the native visuals.
Got you.
Oh, there's a question about background as well.
Yeah, there is a question that just came from Damu. What do you mean by background here? Yeah.
So let me actually show you that because I have the file open. But essentially, what I like to do, and I have some blog posts written on this subject as well, is rather than bringing in the shape type elements individually into your Power BI canvas, what I do is come over to PowerPoint, and a lot of people do much more advanced things with this. Like Miguel on my team uses Adobe Illustrator. It makes it incredibly detailed and has shadows and all this type of fun stuff. But essentially, what we do is we come over here and create what we want our shapes to be, like so. And then if you do a Control A on it and then save it as a picture, over on the Power BI side, you can come over to the paintbrush over here and then say page background and upload that image. there's a lot of benefits to doing it this way. One of them being performance. Another one, which I briefly touched in the presentation piece, is about margins and spacing. And a really good background can make it a lot easier to build out a report without having to be as precise in the report itself.
So now I understand where this technique came from, Chris, because I'm teaching often dashboard in a day, which is, as you know, Microsoft provided training around Power BI. And when it goes to the professional part of the exercise, they ask the attendees to actually import a background image on the page. And I never seen that technique before. I was wondering why would you do that? Why would you hire a graphic designer to do a background image? And then what happens instead of 2 charts? If you want to have 3 charts, you have to go back to him and actually redesign the whole thing. But now I understand. Did you influence that training, by the way?
No, that would have been before my time, or probably before I started doing backgrounds. Honestly, I originally, when I first started starting to kind of build backgrounds, I actually built them on the canvas. So I put a shape here because I logically like to put these things in containers, right? I don't know why exactly, but not only do you suffer performance-wise, if a user accidentally clicks right here, it goes on top. And then you can't get to what you want to. And I can show you real quick. I think it's actually a cool trick that you guys might like. You can prevent things like that from coming to the top. So if you were to say, in this case, we don't want this object to go on top, because a lot of times people do fly out filter panes and cool stuff like that, but we have that issue. You can go bookmark, and you can create a new bookmark and turn off all of your options like that. And if you assign that essentially dead bookmark to that shape, like this, bookmark, I'd probably rename it or whatever, and then I'm going to give it a very minimal tooltip, just a dot. Essentially, that becomes unclickable in the service. So if they click it, it won't come to the top and cause that interaction to go away.
Got it.
I started doing the backgrounds probably about a year and a half ago in Power BI or in PowerPoint and bringing them in there. And it's mostly so I can take the design a lot further than Power BI would let me. And then I think more importantly and more beneficial just to the masses is they eliminate the need to be precise. Let me see if I got an example I can show you on that front too. Let's see, this one should be good. Actually, yeah, this will work.
Out of curiosity, Chris, do you do the same thing also for portrait mode if you want to render this on a mobile device?
Not so much. I haven't done anything mobile since they released the new ability to layer things, which is going to open it up quite a bit. But I usually, the ones that I have done mobile, I would usually just color it the same as the core color. So I'd do a gray one and then build on top of that. Okay. I'm honestly, I need to pick up the new mobile. I haven't had a good project to work on it yet. But I struggled with it quite a bit because I do a lot of in-the-page navigation and bookmarks that make you do things to make it really feel like more of an app or a website than just a basic report. And that wasn't very doable in mobile. I also, and I think they fixed it in the newer build, but I had a lot of issues with the idea that you had to pin visuals to mobile. In particular, you might have a matrix that has 16 columns or something, and it might look fine in desktop version, but then in mobile, it's just too much. And I might want a different variation of that matrix for the mobile experience. But to do that, you'd have to build it and hide it somewhere without it actually being hidden for it to be able to render in mobile. And that was a real nightmare. Let me show you real quick. I got I built the demo on top of a real report, but I just want to show you how far we can take some of these backgrounds. So I rebuilt, this is a template app. Ignore this piece that's going to render because it's not the pretty version yet. Let's see. I think Teams and Power BI combined is complete RAM destruction. Here we go. I think this is it. Yeah, there we go. So if you look at this page, and we can go, I could talk about backgrounds for days, but I know we don't have that much time. If I remove the background and just show you what this looks like without it, it's just a page. It's nothing special, right? If you bring that background in, and if you think about as a creator, just the level of precision needed to really line things up and make it so nothing really stands out. The guidelines are great, but they're much better in Power BI or PowerPoint. Like, there's no way around that. But if we can like bring these elements in, they don't even have to be centered anymore to look like they're like you get pretty close. Like I could put that slightly down, but then when you leave it, it looks fine because your backgrounding has the margins and spacing needed to be able to like give it that feel. And it's much easier to do that in PowerPoint than it is in Power BI. So you don't have to be near as precise as an offer. You can just be like, oh, let's stick it right there and we're good to go. And you can't tell that it's actually off-centered because that box is perfectly centered and aligned. So that's one of the primary reasons I use backgrounds as well.
So there is a question again. How flexible are these backgrounds with different screen resolutions, like 360, 1270?
Yeah, so if you stick to default, which is 16:9 on the page size, and you build off of the default PowerPoint page size, it'll scale perfectly. And screen resolution doesn't necessarily matter in that case, but essentially what you need to do when you're building them is whatever your page size is. So if you did 4:3 or anything custom, just you have to match it perfectly in the PowerPoint, and then it'll be okay. But yeah, I try to stick to 16:9, and I very, very rarely vary, that sounds funny, very rarely break away from the 16:9. There has been instances where somebody asked for 4:3, which was odd, and I built a background for that one. And then I've done like odd custom sizes, but they usually stick to that 16:9 aspect. Like I've done double page sizes to be able to get more range on fonts before and that kind of thing. Cool. I have a blog post that shows exactly how to do this, and it also has a gallery of different backgrounds you can download. And I know there's the comment earlier, like about if I need to change, like say you need to change the size, and you'd have to go hire, like have the person go adjust it. So I like to essentially work like this. If I have this version here, which was the background from that Power BI file, and I decide I actually only want 4 KPIs, then you can easily just come in here and modify it. Like it doesn't take a lot of too much like graphical type skill to be able to do it. So take the group off, delete that, group them back up, and then give it a little bit of bump, and there we go. And then maybe shrink that down, and then we're good to go with a redesign on that background that fits. I talk about it in the blog a little bit as well, but when I'm building these backgrounds, I know this wasn't the main topic, but I like to go on this one. I usually will have like 1 or 2 visuals in mind for a page, and then I'll build the background kind of around that. So like this one, for example, I knew I needed 6 KPIs, which is a lot of KPIs, but I knew I needed to call those out, and I knew I wanted to have a big map in the corner. So if I start with the big buckets and know that I have 6 KPIs, I can fill in other spaces, and then that can actually help kind of influence which visuals to use that apply to the problem we're trying to solve. So by taking that approach, not only does it help performance and with the need to be incredibly specific on the positioning and things, but it can also help you out with like just ideas in general. Like in this case, I know my map wants to fit here. I could fit something over time up here. Maybe there's something over time that's actually interesting for the story. And yes, I can share the background or the template there too. But I have a handful of them out on the site that I'll send over as well. Okay. Now back to desktop. So back to the main thing, which is performance. So essentially, to move these cards to become a matrix that looks like these cards, it takes a lot of massaging of formatting of the matrix itself. So I'm going to just go over to page 2 here, which is where I have them kind of staged and show you through the formatting steps. And then I'll create a new one just to show you from scratch what it looks like. But essentially, we have our matrix visual. The key components here are style is none. Every time I have a matrix, the first thing I do is change style to none and then restyle it on my own, depending on what the project is, to make it fit. Because honestly, the out-of-the-box stuff I'm not a big fan of when it comes to styles. The other really important piece here is to give some row padding. So we have 20 in here now, but that's what gives you the separation between the numbers. And then on our values, so in this case, and in most cases where it would be KPIs, it would just be a bunch of measures that you're pulling in here. So if you only have a matrix that's measures, it'll default kind of in this style up here. So it'll do them horizontally like that. But there is the option to show them on the rows. So if I go to values and have show on rows turned on, it'll give it that look. So I'll turn it off just so you can see. So now it's across the top like that, but we want that on, so it'll look like that. The other thing that I did here is I turned my, let's see if I remember right, my column headers, I gave them a font color that'll blend into the background. So there is a column header there. It's the same color as the background. And then my row headers have a much smaller font size than like the standout card piece. And that's just really to make that number pop. Now there is some limitations. You can't like center this specifically in the middle there. So it's a little bit up, but in this case, and in the case with the customer that we were working with, it actually ended up working out really well as far as their setup goes. You can also take it a little further and add things like, I believe in that case we did KPI indicators, so the little up arrow, down arrow, and it's through a very similar process. But what we did was we took those like this and separated them out. Let me move this guy for us. Go away. There we go. And then we applied the conditional formatting to give icons. And you have to do them one by one, so it's a little bit of a pain.
So initially, just to point out that they had for these icons, for these KPIs, Chris, they had actually special separate visualizations for this, right?
Yep.
So they had like pie charts, or they follow some technique actually to show just the image next to the KPI. And with this technique that he's showing you, essentially it's still one region matrix visualization, but now he's going to show you how you can do actually icon next to it, like an indicator, right?
Yeah, and it's a little bit painful. If it'll let me click. Come on. Oh, I gotta do rules, I think. Based on win rate. We'll do that one. I don't know. Let's see. Just give me an icon. Oh, it doesn't want to give me an icon. Maybe this isn't a good data set for icons. But essentially what we did was applied the icons to the rows, and then what you can do is tell it to only show the icon. So you do each one that's in your table. Let's see if I can get this to do what I want it to do. Format by rules. Win rate closed. Let's find the right field. That would help. Win rate closed. And then I want this to just be, I want it to let me click the buttons the way it's supposed to. 0, 1. Give me the icon. I don't know. I'm doing something wrong there. But at the end of the day, what you can do is you get your icon to show up, and then you can tell it that you only want to see the icon. So you say icon only. And then we can collapse the matrix headers. So you turn off row header wrapping and you collapse it down. So at the end of the day, if that would render how I wanted it to, you'd have icons straight down the list here and then position them with, oh, I know why it's not coming in. The conditional formatting gets goofy when it doesn't have dimensions to compare across. So I think what we did, and Tio, I think you were on the call at the time too, is we created a blank. Was it a blank dimension we brought in?
I don't remember about
Something
putting a
like
blank
that,
dimension.
yeah.
I think it was just work directly on the matrix.
Now we had to bring in a blank to get it to do the conditional. Let me do this real quick, see if it works. This will be fun. Say blank. See if it works. Come on. Come on. I just said blank. It's not that difficult. As it renders. So there's a couple of reasons. So not only is this more performant because you have less visuals rendering, but it actually gives you a more optimized DAX query when you have them rendering as one query. It's something called DAX Fusion. I'm not too deep on it because I'm not that technical, but Phil Seamark on my team, I believe he has a blog post on it. If he doesn't, then it's coming soon. But it's really interesting. Let's see, blank here. So I'm just going to add this right there. Or maybe I'll add it there. Nope. Give me what I want. All right. Well, I can't get there very easily. But anyways, if you bring the icons in and get them formatted correctly, you can collapse those rows so you don't ever have to see the actual icons showing up, and you could put all of the icons in one matrix as well. So I didn't prepare for that piece, but yeah. So the other one, so that was for that matrix. We were able to bring in all of the, so collapse rows meaning slide the header down. So there's a header up here. Let me go and color it real quick. Let's do background color, background color white. So essentially collapse those down. If you have word wrap off, it'll just disappear. And if you have your headers colored or not colored appropriately, it'll just blend right in. Okay. So this other matrix, a little bit different when it comes to formatting. We keep the values on the row like that. We don't, so we leave that option off, the show on rows off, to leave it in columns. And then in this case, we actually utilize the column header that it applies for the for each measure that we pulled in. And then when it comes to formatting, all we really have to do is make those values big, or a little bit bigger, so they're bigger than the bigger than the header, and then we give it some spacing to make it fit. A really important piece to this is on column headers to turn off auto size, because you don't want it to get a big number and shoot out to the side, and you want it to feel like it's going to be perfect every time. So come back over to before, where we have all of these objects rendering, and we have these separate cards. And when we go over to after, it's going to give pretty much the same look. You have to be open to being a little bit variable, but that'll make it so you don't have those performance issues from having way too much stuff on the page.
So Chris, for collapsing rows, is there a setting to do that, or you just blend that in the background? Maybe I missed that part.
No, so it was essentially, if we have a matrix, I'm just going to I'll grab this one. Essentially here, I'm going to format this so it actually looks like a normal matrix real quick. So I'll just say condensed or something. Mm-hmm. Really what we're doing when I said that is we're just slamming it over to the side like that.
Okay.
And the idea is we don't need the headers. If we were doing a second column, essentially, we don't need the headers anymore. And actually, when I first started using this kind of idea, was on a report where we had, I think it was 3 columns, because it was case 1 benchmark 1 and benchmark 2. It was a comparison type situation,
Right.
and they had varying levels of interaction. So there was a slicer for each like case. So there's the base case, benchmark 1 slicer, benchmark 2 slicer, and what we did was we would have 3 of these table like this, and then we had the slicers. So I'm gonna actually see if I can grab something that would slice off of this. Let's see. I'll just grab whatever and see how it goes. So I'll go there. And I will make this a slicer real quick. And it's perfectly colored to blend right into the background on me. So we'll go white. And we had 3 of these, right? And this was a really complicated finance report from back when I was doing that type of work. And it was to be able to compare different customers to cohorts, essentially. So what we'd do is we'd use our edit interactions. And first off, you say that slicer, don't touch these slicers, and don't touch these 2 matrices. And then this slicer, don't touch these 2 slicers, and don't touch the first one or the second one. So it's really heavy when it comes to edit interactions. But as far as benchmarking without complicated model work, it actually worked pretty well. So now we have essentially 3 slicers for 3 independent tables, but you want these tables to read like, this is your base, this is benchmark 1, this is benchmark 2. So what we do is slide that down to nothing, format it a little bit cleaner so it would blend in better, like you'd do the headers differently and that kind of thing, and then overlay them on the sides.
Got you. Actually, my question was about the column headers. As you can see, this black.
Yes. Yeah, so that's all about coloring. So
It's
I
about
think
coloring. Okay.
Yeah, if you go to the none style on a matrix, the column header color is actually transparent, so I can say revert to default on it. I think. Oh, I'm not on none anymore. So style, none, and now it's just a clear. Yeah, but you do have to do things like, you see how there's that gray box there for the grid. So you'd say on column header, outline, none. So those are the little like nitpicky steps to make sure it blends in really well. You also want to make sure you allow enough room for like large numbers. So in this case, if that 23, or I guess that's 2.3 million, is an outlier type situation, and you didn't see it or you didn't think it was going to get to that many digits as you were building, you might cut it off like that. But it's important to make sure you allow enough room, because it's at the end of the day, it's pretty much invisible. So you could give it plenty of room like that.
Got you. A few questions, if you don't mind interrupting you for a second.
Oh, absolutely.
So Rebecca was asking, is there a way to custom sort row headers in a matrix? And then she clarifies that, for instance, my values are red, green, and yellow. When the matrix renders, I want the order of the data to be red, green, and yellow. I know I could sort ascending and end up with green, red, yellow, or descending.
I think so. Let me think about this for a second. I think what you do in this case, in this same instance where we're only using measures, it actually, if I remember right, and let me check it because I don't want to be wrong.
I think actually but please, try that. I think she answered her question by saying that maybe another column that does custom sort.
Yes, so you'd bring in like a custom sort off of a different table that sorts that one, or in this case where it's only measures in here and it's not really dimensions, you can't sort it, but it keeps the order in which you bring them in. So if I move row or win rate closed down, then it moves it there. So yeah, these ones don't sort. But the idea is, like in a card situation, you wouldn't sort. They're going to be in stagnant locations. And the cool part about this, and I believe with the customer we did a similar thing, is if I go to the after section here, as Power BI kills me, you can totally like span the length of a page and have completely different categories here, as long as there's no weird filtering and things going on. if you give it enough space and you give it the right background, so say in this case, starting at average days is actually a completely independent section. Come over here to my background, break this guy up a little bit, like that. Give it some space and margin, like that, and then save that. We'll go, this is going to be Atlanta BG1. There we go. And now when we're on desktop, it's essentially the same backgrounding steps. But at the end of the day, what we can do is, even though these metrics are part of completely different pieces of your report and completely different pieces of your story, you can give them that separation through the background while keeping them in the same metrics. Let's go desktop here. And Atlanta. Okay, and then I'll go fit. And then if you give it the right positioning, and again, here is trial and error when it comes to positioning those pieces of it. But if I give it a little bit more padding, it'll probably work out pretty well.
And you use PowerPoint for your background images, right? I think you mentioned that you're not a fan of Adobe Illustrator or anything like that.
I'm just not experienced enough, I think, with it.
Right.
Miguel on my team uses it and swears by Adobe Illustrator. I can do plenty inside of PowerPoint to the point where I don't feel like I really need to get into Adobe at this point. Like, for example, I'll share you this one real quick, just to give you an idea of how like crazy you can take these backgrounds. SIT, and then I'm going to go open the file as well so you can see what all is a background piece. Let's go here. So we have this project it's for an esports team. Cloud9 is the name, and it was another brand partnership, and we built this report, and for that audience and for the purpose of it, it was going to be used on a webcast show that they did. But I built out this background in Power BI. Let me find the right one. I think they landed. Oops, sorry. PowerPoint's slow on me. You can see there's a lot going on here. And a lot of it's like I tried something and I don't want to quite delete it yet, but yeah. Oh, there we go. So they landed on this one, which is a lot going on. So you can see there's a ton of layers, and I'm able to do all of this in PowerPoint with no like real design experience. And then the report itself, if I go to my workspace here, I think it's on my workspace because that's where I put all my testy type stuff. I think it's this one. You can show how it renders up real quick. Here we go. There we go. So essentially by building those elements into the background, we can do cool stuff like making the hover, make it look like things appear. So you go like, oh, I'm going to click that, and then that actually goes and applies some filters, and you can really blend things well together and give it things like accents and shading and that kind of thing. And that's all PowerPoint. And I don't like when I showed Miguel, who's the expert when it comes to that, when I showed him what I did in the PowerPoint piece, he was very surprised that it wasn't Adobe. But you're like, this is just a gradient piece, and it's just creative layering, really, when it comes down to it.
So how many visuals are involved in this report?
That's
like
the funny part, is not that many. So I can actually, let me pop open the PBX, because there's something else in here that I think you guys would like. It's a 52-part switch statement that actually performs. So let me get that going.
And there are some comments. This is a very sharp looking. Yeah, this report actually looks very nice. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a brand partnership with this team. We did a report for their use for like analyzing and like getting ready for matches, and they actually just launched a video of it a couple weeks ago that shows like how the players use it and stuff, which was really cool. I can send you a link to that as well, Tio. And then this component is for a webcast show that they do, and so every week they have their show, they have guests on, so it'd be like players from either this team or other teams. The host of the show will prep for the show ahead of time and figure out which views he wants to use, and use personal bookmarks to be able to like lock those views down in the service. But the cool part was trying to solve the problem of how do we visualize 52 different metrics. And at the end of the day, we didn't really need to visualize them all at the same time. And this popped up on the other window, so once it renders, I'll bring it over to the main one.
And this hover effect, for the images to, change, is that in the background image itself, or use like a bookmarks or something, something special?
So it was buttons overlaying the background with the right kind of transparency on them, essentially. So let me jump over to this second page because this first one is going to be heavy. Come on. So I feel like Power BI is always slower when
you do presentations. Yep.
Yeah.
I also noticed that when you open several instances,
that's why I was just shutting this one down. Okay. Wow. So slow. Okay, here we go. So really what I want to show you here is what it looks like without a background. But still, there's still quite a few things here, but it's mostly buttons. Come on. Come on. You're not putting up a good show, Power BI. Okay, starting. Almost. Okay. Just waiting on the images, I think. Which in the service, they popped right away. Okay. So if I were to look at this thing without the background, just go background, and you can see pretty quickly how much of the design comes from the background itself. There's not a lot going on here. This is essentially 2 cards for each one of these little rows here. And the reason it's 2 separate ones is because we have 2 different filtering with different interactions applied to them. But at the end of the day, what we wanted to build here is something where the host could come up with the story and then flip between metrics. So in this case, they have KDA, which is a metric. If they want to change it, it clicks a button and it brings a bookmark that actually surfaces this slicer that is connected to that fancy switch statement. So they can come in and change this to any of the matrix they want to, or any of the metrics they want to, and it'll actually swap out those 2 cards in this case. Like that. I know we didn't come here for that, but bookmarks and buttons are kind of a passion of mine, which is really silly, and it's normally not that slow. I'm blaming Teams. There we go.
Cool.
But yeah, the background stuff, Adobe, if you know how to use it, incredibly powerful, but also not necessary. And like I have no training in this space, so.
Excellent.
Cool. Any other questions related to that piece, or if we want to go back to the performance piece, we can totally look more at that, or anything in general, honestly.
I guess no questions at this point, Chris. Maybe we can go back and kind of, if you want to show us something else, that'll be awesome.
Yeah. So why don't we do this? Let me show you. I'll do it in PowerPoint form because, and maybe I won't. I'm going to go to the real thing. Let's go. I mentioned that I did a project for the Ryder Cup, and that really helped kind of land getting me on this team. I think it opened a lot of eyes to some of the stuff we could do in Power BI, and it like really just got me in the right contacts to kind of work my way over to this team. But let me show you that real quick, because the important piece is, if the service will render for me. Come. Sorry. The important pieces to think of here are that at the time this was created, there was no ability to group visuals. You couldn't use shift and click in the selection pane. You'd have to hold control and click each individual element specifically. And you could also not, like, buttons didn't exist at the very beginning of the development on this. They did by the end of it, and we transitioned over to them. But originally it would have been like images overlaying or shapes overlaying text to be able to do this. I'm gonna let it load, and I don't know why it's running so raggedy. It shouldn't be this slow. I bet if I look at my CPU right now, it's like dying. Yeah, 65%. Memory's 83% right now. Okay. But we built this thing for Jim Furyk to be able to help pick his team. And it's really not performing today on here. I'm going to turn the camera off and see if that helps for some reason.
Okay.
And then you can't see how discouraged I am by this terrible performance. Okay, starting to render. Might have helped. It might have just been a placebo. Wow, slow. Okay. So anyways, we built this thing for Jim Furyk to help him pick his team, and then help with actually like placing people in the matches for Ryder Cup. So if anybody's familiar with golf on the call, Ryder Cup is primarily driven by points system. So 8 of the 12 players on the team are done through a point system, and then the captain of the team gets to pick the remaining 4. So it was a partnership between the PGA and Microsoft, and then as well as Ernst & Young and a golf analytics company called Scouts. So this one has a lot of really interesting bells and whistles on it that I've brought components of into further reports down the line. So this, for example, when I click the eye in the corner, pops up that information that gives you more definitions and gives some context as to who was involved and that kind of thing. And then you can click anywhere to get out of that. We also built in this help. And again, this was well over 2 years ago now that we built this piece. And I actually have a blog. I do this a lot. I have a blog post on it. And this one looks a little bit funny, but when you click help, for example, it'll tell you kind of how to interact with the report. So it says, okay, up here's your navigation. You click the player if you want to take it directly to them on the profile. If you hover here, it'll do this and that. You can adjust the time here. Like Power BI for end users can be really difficult, because if they have a lot of different reports by a lot of different authors, each report is going to have different features. So that drill through that was there on all those other reports might not be there, or that drill through that you've never even heard of before is a component of that table and you just didn't know it. So being able to call those items out in the page without having to give training on how to navigate through your report can be incredibly powerful.
Mm-hmm. And this is done all with bookmarks, right? So
yeah,
when you click help, okay.
Selected visual bookmarks that render essentially images on top. So in this case, it was a Power BI like shapes situation. But more recently, I've done the PowerPoint thing. I land my report exactly how I want it, and I'd screenshot it, bring it into PowerPoint, and build up that guide piece on top of it. You might have seen as I was kind of flipping through like this one, for example, in with the backgrounds here, there's going to be like an overlay component. So that's where I built it out. And then once you build it out on top, you delete the underlying image, and then you have like a full-fledged overlay that has transparency to it. So you can't see it here, but there's a white box here that's got 70% transparency. So you can tell that you're kind of on top, and it gives it that more website-y app kind of feel to it. And I have resources on how to do that stuff as well. But yeah, we built this thing to help with selection, but then to also help with pairing. So we have like this home page. This one was stopped updating when we had 3 of the 4 picks were done already. So they kind of pick in waves. So he had picked Bryson, Phil, and Tiger by this point. Early on in development, Tiger was actually one of our users, which was pretty funny to see. And I guess the rumor was he had a surface because Microsoft provided the captains and vice captains surfaces, and he had pulled himself up on this thing and was going around showing the other players his stats for the year because he was really making a comeback that year. So yeah, they had 3 of the 4 We brought in cool stuff like tooltips to show how their points progressed over the years, so you could see if people were streaky or if they had kind of like gone up quick and then flattened out, like Patrick Reed did there. I think he won the Masters that year, or it would have been 2017, I think, that we're looking at there, that he won the Masters, and then he flattened out after that. So you could see like he got in on points alone, but if it was up for a decision, he'd been pretty flat, maybe not worth a pick. The other pages to this one are a little bit more exciting. So player profile, for example. This is the one where once it loads, and again, it's really not that slow in real life. I don't know what it's doing, but it should be about a 2-second thing to navigate like that. Including earlier today, it was about a 2-second thing. But essentially, this is where I came up with this idea of using bookmarks to navigate content within a page. So the overall problem we were trying to solve is how do you make this thing, first off, touchscreen friendly, performant, and easy to navigate for the end user who's never seen Power BI before. Like Jim Furyk does not care about Power BI. As long as he's able to get to what he wants to, then he's going to be happy, and he's never going to use Power BI again, probably. So we have a lot of stats to visualize, and we decided to bucket them into these categories: the results, scoring, off the tee, approach, around the green, and putting. And then rather than displaying everything, which would be incredibly bad performance and hard, like overwhelming, like I mentioned in that earlier piece, what we did is decided on bookmarks to navigate only what's in this window. So we stay on the same page, right, and we're able to swap from from results to scoring with a click like that. And if we wanted to go to off the tee, then it's just another click. It's the same type of concept all across the board here. And remember, visuals could not be grouped at this time, so this was a nightmare scenario to create, and I would have never suggested it to anybody if they didn't bring in visual grouping. Now with visual grouping, really all you need to do, and this is actually, it's incredibly useful, is you hide the group or unhide the group. You don't have to hide the individual objects anymore. So if you wanted to say, bring in a new visual to this group, all you have to do in the selection pane is slide it into the group, and you don't even have to redo bookmarks. It's amazing.
And if something is hidden, then it's not going to get rendered. So for example, you can have like 50 visuals here organized in different tabs, and most of those are hidden. That will not impact the performance, right?
Yeah, so not only do you not build up other time, you don't run the DAX query until you expose it. So even if you have heavy DAX, it's one of the tricks that I like to play if I have a DAX situation that you can't really work around by optimizing. So say you have slow DAX because you're doing like a Kager, which is like a really heavy, expensive DAX measure. So it like does some math to the second power and this and that. And there's really no way to optimize it beyond a certain point, especially if your data set's large. So rather than landing your end user with that measure, if you have a lot of measures to visualize, for example, maybe you land them on one of the ones that renders a little quicker, and then they have some stuff to look at, and then they can click the button to move to that really heavy one, and it'll only render by itself. So they get that perception that it's actually a lot more performant than it is, which is actually really valuable.
This is Stephanie. We use this approach a lot, and I think it looks awesome. This is a really gorgeous dashboard here.
Oh, thank you.
My understanding, how I use it is the approach to green that you have highlighted in white there. That's actually two visuals, right? So one is the grayed out visual and one is the white visual. And so it becomes grayed out when another selection is chosen. Is that how you do it?
Yeah, we actually, it's because this predates conditional formatting of buttons, because currently I use conditional formatting, although that does add more DAX queries to your scenario. Mm-hmm. What we did was have two versions of each button. We had like the clicked version and the unclicked version. I still do that quite a bit if I don't have a good reason to go the conditional formatted route. Mm-hmm. So when you click, what it does is it swaps out those two buttons. So it gives you the unselected version. So I click here, it's going to hide this line, expose a line that's already there but hidden, mm-hmm. and then swap those two buttons out.
Yeah, that's what we're doing too. And I'm glad to know that doesn't impact performance. That's a really great looking
It really helps. Like people don't like not only does it not impact, it helps dramatically, because not only did you like limit the things running, you're simplifying the user experience. They don't need to see putting. You don't need to render putting. Like a lot of times I'll go to customers and I'll see like really long page length, and they'll end up like having really bad performance. And the solution to that, and it's not necessarily the best solution, because they might want a big long scrolling page. But if you organize the content in like this matrixed fashion, where you navigate through by clicking to the content you care about, you don't run into the situation where the query that's a visual at the bottom of the page that the end user is never going to get to is actually slowing down the performance on the parts they care about up top. And they can also dive directly in. It's almost like indexing the content, right? So they can dive directly into the things they care about.
Chris, you mentioned that nowadays you will use conditional formatting as a substitute, but I think I lost you there. How would you format a button conditionally?
Let me give you a taste of that real quick. So I'm just going to come into desktop and create a new button. So this was added probably about 6 months ago or so. It's fairly new. But I can go insert a new button like this. I'll just do a blank one. And the buttons, I believe it was 6 months ago or so, they added the ability to conditionally format a lot of different things in there. So number one is you can conditionally format what text is displayed. So if you have like some dynamic scenario, you can bring in a measure that renders text and it'll swap out to whatever you have. So the menu will look the same as it does on visual. So you say based on field, and then you grab your field. So that way, if you have filtering, it would impact it. The other stuff that you can conditionally format is the color. So that's the most important part in this idea. Is I could do like a black one. All right, I'm gonna have to jump into that piece here to do it, but you could do, let's see. I'm gonna do this really quickly. I'm gonna go home. I'm going to enter something real quick. I just want to get like an A/B scenario so I can show you how the slicer will impact it. There we go. A, B. And the cool part here is if you get really fancy, you can actually use bookmarks to drive like a hidden slicer that's under the hood, and nobody will ever see it, and it's disconnected from everything, but it gives you not only the slice, but moving the conditional formatting as well. So once that renders, Power BI just made a noise, but I don't know what the noise means. There we go. It's doing something else. Oh, it's loading. Okay. Wait for it. And there's no relationship. Doesn't need a relationship in this case. Come on. Wait for it. Okay. So I'm going to go grab. Wow, it's so slow.
Yeah.
So slow.
With the sharing piece also, I also noticed that when you do Teams, share your screen, things tend to be slow.
I'm going to close this other one. Hopefully that'll help it a little bit too, because that's a heavy. Everything about that report is a little heavy. Okay. There we go. We're able to move again. So slicer. I'm going to grab this type and just stick it right here. I'm going to say this is a slicer. And I'll pick A. And then on this conditional formatting, I can say I want to do my text is test button. Use my loud clacks. I get yelled at by Matthew on my team. If you guys are familiar with Matthew, he's not a fan of the loud clacky keyboard. And then I can say font color, for example, and I can base it on my new field slicer type. And actually, I'm going to go rules rather than based on field. I'm going to say slicer type. And I probably shouldn't have done A and B. I should have done 1 and 2. Dang it. Sorry. I'm gonna cheat my way out of this, and I'm gonna say if the distinct count is greater than 1 and less than 100, then give me red. And if it is 1, then give me black. And what this would do in this case is if you're filtered, then it gives you black, but if you're unfiltered, it should turn red, like that. But what you can do with this is you can also format any of the objects. So we did the text color. You could make this guy base it off of a field if there's one that makes sense. So think like custom navigation that filters based or changes labeling based on the filtering applied, that kind of thing. So that would change to B, and it's back to black because it's only on 1. Now it's red again. But you can also do the hover state, which is cool. So this gets pretty deep.
Okay.
But again, you can do the conditional formatting piece. So rules.
I missed that on hover thing. Okay, so actually you can do that as well now. Great.
Yeah, and you can conditionally formatting on hover. So it's very tedious and painful when you start doing the conditional formatting piece. Because you have to make sure you apply it to each step. So it has to be not only on the default, but also on the hover. Otherwise, it's not going to make much sense unless you have a situation where you want the hover to be doing the same thing every time.
Right.
But we'd say like distinct count is, let's say 2, and make it purple. And if it is 1, then make it green. I don't know, whatever. So now we're red. Let's see if I blow this on the first pass. Oh, I didn't grab the right field. That'll explain it. Slicer type, there we go. Distinct count. Okay, so now we hover and it's purple, which is kind of hard to see, but if I make this a little bit bigger. You can also make the size on hover change, which a lot of people don't recognize too. Like the being able to switch the states between select and hovered you can really give it like an app type feel, but it's also easy to get out of control with it, like make it blow up like that. But now if I'm on A, for example, when I hover, it's going to be green. So there's a ton of stuff you can do in this case when it comes to conditional formatting. The one thing you can't do that I would love to see them add is the ability to conditionally set the transparency. So we can conditionally set the color, but we can't control the transparency. And a lot of times you'd want it to be blank. And then like when it's activated, essentially, like you have the right slicing situation, it goes to 0, but you can't do that.
So then, okay, so hover, I got it. So when you click on it, then it kind of triggers a bookmark that hides everything else.
Yep.
And okay, so it's a bookmark action on the button.
Yeah, and I have a lot of written material on bookmarks and navigating depth through bookmarks. Being able to do like this type of action. So this is hover turns white, click turns blue, because that's another status you can set. And then the click moves the box and changes the visuals out. There's also a lot of ways to use bookmarks to navigate depth. So avoiding end users getting lost in their drill downs and drill ups, or drilling multiple visuals at the same time, which is incredibly useful. You can sort with bookmarks. I'm all about bookmarks. So
he's a bookmark guy.
Yeah. Any other questions on the main topic, which is the performance piece, or anything in general, honestly?
Do you guys have any questions? I don't see anything in the chat window except that it's time to feed the pups and got some other things to do. Can you share a resource on how you did the tap and change the content in the same page?
I will send that. So I'll cover this real quickly. I'll show you some of the topics with the time we have remaining. But this is the personal blog I keep. It's all about front-end user stuff, so there's not going to be anything DAX or query related in here. It's more about creative ways to do different things. So like the first piece the first one I wrote was all about background. So much of the stuff I talked about today, and like demonstrations, step by step, exactly how to build things out and bring them in. In addition to that piece, I also have this background gallery where you can go download the PowerPoint files if you want a place to start from. Some of them are from real projects. So for example, this one is from a template app that I did for the Microsoft 365 usage template. So you get the real world example and the backgrounds that you can use, and they use this unique tabbing look to it. So it's a kind of cool one. This one was from Azure Search template app. This was from the sales sample that Miguel created. So that one's incredibly complicated when it comes to background work because it's got all these weird shapes and stuff. But you can download the files and modify them or whatever.
And yours are PowerPoint files, so they can change it, right?
Yeah, these are all PowerPoint files. So you hit download, it'll give you the PPT that you can do whatever you want with it. Because the containers aren't going to fit. Like majority of the times, it might fit if you're lucky, especially if it's a broad container like this one. And this one's actually really cool. It has cutouts in it, so if you change the color of your page background, it shines through. So you could make that whatever color you want to, because it's like a transparency in the background. And I have a blog post written on that piece as well. Navigating, or actually, let me show you this real quick. So overlays, so this is the concept of like giving a guide on the page. Again, it has everything step by step, how to do it, how to implement it. And then this one will be good. This is in-page navigation. So this explains on the Ryder Cup project how we used the buttons to navigate across to, let me get to the end result here. So you can use buttons to navigate across. And I also have the PBIX you can download there as well. So you can see it in its complete form. And lastly, that I'm going to call out, because there's several of them here. Let's do user-friendly drill down. I really like this one. This one shows how powerful bookmarks can really be. We can do things like navigate from year to month or to quarter, like essentially simplifying the user's interaction needed to do drill downs. This idea we came up with after, it was before the plus minus sign was there. So to be fair, it's not as powerful as it used to be, but came up with it after watching a user drill down and then get lost, which happens a lot, especially if you have more than 2 or 3 layers to your matrix. So they drill down, they right click, drill down, right click, drill down, and then to get back up, it's right click, drill up, right click, drill up. But using this method, you can just navigate throughout the hierarchy without even having to think about it. So it's got that one. It's got also drilling down on 2 visuals at the same time. So this was a very common request to actually people say is how to, like, I want to be able to have the whole page drill down at the same time. If you use the buttons, you can do it. So this one shows navigating the table and the line graph from year to quarter with just 1 click. It gives you all of the steps you need to set that kind of thing up. So yeah, cool. Hopefully that was helpful and you guys liked it. Feel free to ask questions with the time remaining, or if you have questions you want to feed back up, happy to take them as well.
Well, that was great.
One.
Chris, go ahead.
Sure. Go. This is more about the user experience than the kind of stuff that you're talking about, but I noticed when you were in your cloud view that you had several versions of the same report. And I've heard Patrick lecture about how you should publish up one data set and then have other reports driven off of that. And I've been trying to train my team to do that. Yeah. But now we end up having a workspace that ends up having 20 of the same basic report with just slight variations on the visuals. Is that a best practice, or what do you recommend for a best practice there?
He's going to be right on that one. And honestly, a lot of the stuff I was looking at in the service is just a mess, because that's not the place we end up hosting these things at the end of the day. So and also being in Microsoft, it's fairly unmanaged, which is kind of funny. But we have something like 160,000 Power BI users. So like managing access is or managing what's displayed is kind of a tough battle in this case. because there's a lot of stuff that people just share to everybody. They share the report to the whole company, and then they have row level security applied because that's like the easiest way out for them when it comes to sharing. So I think Patrick's method is probably the best one, and it's actually a really good one when it comes to trying to co-author, because a lot of times the person doing the front end isn't necessarily the person who's doing the back. And Phil Seamark and I were working on something recently where he was doing all the modeling and all the decks, but I needed to get going on the report build itself. So he built a Power BX Power PBIX that was only the model and published it, and then I pointed to that data set. And then he's able to continue working on his side while I work on the front end part. So yeah, I think I'd follow Patrick's method in that case.
So it's not really a bad practice to have 20 people have some version of the same report off the same data set.
I think it's better than having 20 different versions of the same data set.
Well, yeah.
So,
but there's not a different.
Yeah.
Not another way to allow people to customize their specific, say, so we have a customer operations team that everybody has their own customer, so they want to have different visuals for their customer that are always filtered their way, that they can send on a dashboard.
So another thing you can do, Stephanie, for this particular requirement is to do this new feature, relatively new, called personalized visuals.
Got it.
So when you enable, I'm not sure if you tried that one, but if you enable visuals to be personalized when you deploy them to Power BI, then the user can go and actually change those visualizations. They can switch, for example, from matrix to pie chart or whatever. They can apply different filters, and they can create something called personal bookmark. So to save the state of that page just for them. So your users don't have to have edit permissions to change the report. They still have read only, but they can personalize them. I use actually this for another client, and I have a similar requirement where some users prefer, let's say, a matrix visualization to be at the high level, maybe at the market level. So they have a hierarchy, market and then territory and whatever. So like 4 levels hierarchy. Some of them prefer to see the numbers at the high level. Some of them prefer actually to drill down. So they call these views. And initially when they started on Power BI, they will create actually a new page for every view they wanted to have. And obviously that's not desired. So that personalized visual feature became very, very handy, actually. So if you want me, I can show you how to enable this.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. Yeah, thank you. That's perfect.
Cool. Any other questions for, I'm adding a personalized visual page on all of my reports. It's popular so far. Rebecca is saying that. Yep.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Chris? We are kind of close to the end of this meeting. Anything you want to ask him? I guess not. Well, Chris, thank you so much. This was wonderful.
Yeah, I'm glad you liked it. I know we strayed a little bit from the original intent, but I hope it was valuable and give you some ideas. Feel free to check out the blog. I also am fairly active on Twitter, as a lot of our team is, and Power BI side of things. And I recently started, I've only done one so far, but I started streaming report building. For you guys, it's probably pretty late because I don't do it until like evening time, but they are recorded. I'll send a link to the channel on that one too. I've only done the one, and it's really like you get to see me mess up and change my mind repeatedly as I try to figure out exactly what I want to do with a certain report.
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much, Chris. Have a great
Thanks,
evening.
guys.
Guys, I'll see you. Actually, for the next meeting is going to be on August 31st. Instead of September because of the Labor Day. So the next one actually is going to be the guy in the cube. Patrick LeBlanc is going to tell us is going to teach us calculation groups in Power BI. So I hope you can make that as well, August 31st. Awesome.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye now.
Bye. See you.
Okay, thank you, Chris. PowerPoint slides. Gonna stop recording.